This is Yusef. I don't have Siddhartha with me, as you can see. Peace to you and God save Serbia. Let me say at the beginning in case I run long. Beginning the 7 Ecumenical Councils. We have the first and the great Council of Nicaea. And Council of Nicaea started out because there was a monk that was his name was Arius, and he came from Antioch. And as we know, Antioch its the thrust of its teaching was the humanity of Christ, and Alexandria, the thrust of its teaching was the divinity of Christ. And we can see these in the movements that sprouted from them. Antioch had Paul of Samosata, who was almost like the Da Vinci Code kind of guy. Well, Arius went to Alexandria and started teaching this idea that Christ was not God. He may have been a God. He was lesser than the Father, not co-equal and co-eternal. Well, his teaching caught the eye of Alexander and Athanasius, Alexander of Antioch, or Alexander of Alexandria, and Athanasius of Alexandria. And it started this disruption in the unity of Christianity. And when people heard about Arius' teachings, they said, we don't hear anything wrong with this. This is fine. And so Constantine finally convened the Council of Nicaea to settle this matter. He was there, and there was different numbers of people. We'll take one of the more modest ones, 300, which is usually the one stated upon. Some people say 600 and some odd. Some people say 300 and such. Some people say 298. I think that number comes after the 300 number, which felt was 300 to 2. But it certainly wasn't a Renaissance king with a blonde page boy haircut, dressed in as a early Renaissance king would, with 6 people sitting around the table as the Lost Gospels, the little documentary that they did on National Geographic, the Lost Gospels, how they portrayed it, and it wasn't in a Gothic hall. None of these things would have existed. So Constantine at a city called Nicaea called this council, and a lot of the bishops came there thinking that they were going to defend Arius, except when they actually heard what he had to say, they were outraged. And when Arius started actually expounding on what he meant, that Christ was not, because they thought, oh, this is just a rejection of Sabellianism, which Sabellianism had already been rejected. When they heard what he said, one particular really devout priest called Nicholas, who we know as Saint Nicholas, got up and punched Arius in the face. Kindly in the hymns they say rebuked him with his hand. No, Nicholas punched him in the face. He was stripped of his robes and thrown into jail. And then the legend has it that the Virgin Mary came and gave him back his robes. Some say the Jesus appeared to him and gave him back his robes. Some say St. Peter gave him back his robes. I think some say Apostle Andrew gave him many different things, but a miraculous event happened. But later on, Nicholas would be reinstated. So Athanasius seemingly went to be, the guy who would have to defend against all these people. Well, when they heard Arius's teaching, many of the Christians who had suffered these long persecutions, the last one being under Diocletian, some people say, oh, well, it lasted under Maxinius, and then there was Licentius, or Licinus, however you pronounce it, that was the last persecution. Well, so these people had suffered. I mean, these weren't, just guys sitting around big I mean, some had eyes gouged out. Some of them were on, like, pallets because their legs had been broken. And some of their bones were falling out of their feet because their feet had been burnt. form of torture. Well, they had this they were introducing different ancient baptismal creeds. Well, do you agree with this one? Do you agree with that? And they wanted to get one so that it could, the Arians could not agree with it and would reject it, and they could be, thrown out as schismatics. They said the Son being eternally begotten. No, the Arians said no. We can agree with that, and people were just, so. Constantine actually is the one that threw out the word. I mean, he didn't really have any part in the council. He was just overseeing it, but he had ideas. And Constantine was a complex man. It took him a while to convert to Christianity, and in his conversion to Christianity, he had, he accepted Christ kind of with the other gods, and then slowly became a Christian, which, for me, I see that as being devout with people. Oh, so he was trying to co-opt things together. But no, it was a struggle. It was a journey for him. I don't doubt that, but he threw out a word that was very offensive, and that was a Gnostic term that everybody hated when they heard it, which is homoousios. Now that's different from homoousios, which the Arians would have been comfortable with, of like substance or of like essence. And when they saw the revulsion of the Arians at this, they thought, okay, what is really bad about this? Okay, but we can agree with this, but it's a Gnostic term. We don't really like it. And then they thought, no, that actually is true, that Christ is one essence with the Father. I mean, if we're saying Christ is co-equal and co-eternal and there's one God, yes, that's a proper term. So 298 voted for the Nicene Creed in the form of having homoousios in it, or homoousion. Hang on how it's used. And two rejected Arius being one of them, and then somebody who had agreed with Arius. I think it was Eusebius. I think it was Eusebius in Nicea that voted with him. Don't quote me on that second one, but I think it was him. And surprisingly, I mean, the mythology that Western and American societies have is, and then that's when it changed, and purgatory and the books of the Bible and Marcion. No, that's all crap. Like I talked about Deus Paladin and the idiocy. He didn't even Wikipedia it. He said, that's where Marcionism was dispelled and the 27 books of the canon were entered. No. None of that happened there. I think they talked about the dates of Easter too, but this was the big controversy that they came to settle. Funny enough, after signing on to this and saying, yeah, this is a version, Constantine, along with pretty much all the other bishops, lapsed into Arianism, and were teaching Arianism for a very long time. And this was a period called Athanasius contra mundo, Athanasius against the world. I had always asked, what about Saint Nicholas? What about Spiridon? What about and some my godfather's son, who is also, I called him Matthew the hymnographer, because that song, the how a hook from heaven came and tore your bowels open. He said, yeah, right, when he was walking whilst the courtyard, they stabbed the bastard. It splayed his guts open. And I said, that should be a hymn, He said, yeah, it should be Athanasius. Athanasius and Friends doesn't quite have the same ring to it. So I smiled. I said, okay, I get it. So Arius died. Some say it was assassination. Some say he just had a bowel obstruction or something like that. But he died, and his Arianism caught on a long time. Finally, Athanasius wound up championing the day after I think decades, actually. Then Arianism was still going strong among the Vandals and the Visigoths. They were Arians. That's why they were trying to get to Hippo to kill Augustine. This is how the Filioquit wound up developing in Spain and Germany, because of, the Germanic peoples had moved. The Visigoths had stayed in Spain. They didn't stay in Italy, but they stayed in Spain. And the Vandals came through Spain. These were Arians. These people following Arianism. In fact, the first translation into the Germanic language was an Arian translation of the Bible. Now, Athanasius wound up championing the day with true orthodoxy, but Arianism lasted for a while. What else to add about this? Yeah, the myth that, oh, Constantine created the Catholic Church at that point, and then, you know, those were the only churches that had got his seal of approval. Well, how could that be possible when he just basically ignored the Nicene Creed right afterwards? And how most of the other bishops, almost all of them, ignored it as well. The next video I'm going to do is the Council of Constantinople, where we finally finish up the Nicene Creed, because the Nicene Creed at that point was only the first 2/3. The last third, talking about the Holy Spirit, was at Constantinople, and I will get to that. So this was about the First Ecumenical Council, the Council of Nicaea, or First Council of Nicaea, I should say. Peace to you. May God save Serbia and Syria. I hope you'll stay with me to hear all about the other 6. They're not co-equal and co-eternal. Well, his teaching caught the eye of Alexander and Athanasius, Alexander of Antioch, or Alexander of Alexandria, and Athanasius of Alexandria, code kind of guy. Well, Arius went to Alexandria and started teaching this idea that Christ was not God. He may have been a God. He was lesser than the first and the great Council of Nicaea. And Council of Nicaea started out because there was a monk that was his name was Arius, and he came from Antioch. And as we know, Antioch had always its thrust of its teaching was the humanity of Christ, and Alexandria, the thrust of its teaching was the divinity of Christ. And we can see these in the movements that sprouted from them. Antioch had Paul of Samosata, who was almost like the Da Vinci. This is Yusef. I don't have Siddhartha with me, as you can see. Peace to you and God save Serbia. Let me say at the beginning in case I run long. Beginning the 7 ecumenical councils. We have the